Now let's answer the questions. The first question, as can often be anticipated, is the main point question. They really want to make sure you understand that for after reading a passage, what the main point is. Just very similar to logical reasoning main point questions, and we know what the main point is. You can sort of anticipate the answer choice, which is that creating a link to a document is not the same thing as as distribution in our traditional sense of copyright infringement. So let's see which one of the answer choices summarize that. Since distribution of a document placed on a web page is controlled controlled by the author, that's true, of that page rather than by the person who creates a link, true, creating such a link should not be considered infringement. That's exactly right. The whole argument is trying to make this argument that this is not copyright infringement. I mean, think about the consequences. If this were copyright infringement, then all the internet is copyright infringement, right? And there are people who think that, that we call them the bad guys. But anyway, this is all good. It's the descriptively accurate, and it's getting to the main point. So B says changes in copyright laws in response to development of web pages and links are ill-advised. I think that's right, unless such changes amplify rather than restrict the free change of ideas necessary in democracy. What are they talking about? This stuff is just not. None of this stuff is the main point. I mean, this is not bad, right? Changes copyright, and it's not even changes. The author doesn't want you to make copyright law more restrictive. But aside from author not really agreeing with the statement, it certainly doesn't summarize the main point. C says people who are concerned about the access others may have to web documents they create can easily prevent. I mean, this is true. Can easily prevent access without inhibiting rights of others to exchange free ideas. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's true, but it's not the main point. C is talking about sort of you can put a password and protect your stuff if you want. But okay, but that's not the main point of the passage. D says problems concerning intellectual property rights created by new forms of electronic media are not insuperably difficult to resolve. In other words, you could resolve it if one applies basic common sense principles. Fine, yeah, I suppose, right? But it's not the main point. Yeah, this is true. It's a true statement. You can overcome these difficulties. E says maintaining a free exchange of ideas on the web offer benefits that far outweigh those that might be gained by a small number of individuals. Radical alterations aimed at or allowed, I suppose, far outweigh than the small number of individuals. All these things are a little too specific. Too specific. I don't like too specific because not for the sake of being too specific. Many times too specific is exactly right. But here it's too specific because it's wrong because it's just not where do we get that? Far outweigh, too small, and sort of besides the point, it's just not. This is not the main conclusion of the argument. The main point of the argument is that the author is trying to argue for you that this whole, that's what all this stuff is. That linking is not the same thing as copyright infringement. Question 16 says, which one of the following most closest in meaning to strengthen as used in line A? So with a line citation, you go back to the line, you find the thing that they're talking about. So that's this. Now, it'd be great if you sort of already knew what that meant. But see, if you thought about it, as you were reading, you've already knew. That'd be great because really the point is sort of not to go back as infrequently as possible. Hopefully you can just on your gut find the right answer choice. But here, what does it mean to strengthen copyright law? How do the producers want? What does that mean? They want it to be strengthened. Do they want to be more restrictive, less restrictive? Of course, more restrictive. Right? They want it to be more restrictive. Fewer people can access it. Whereas, in contrast, the tension created, in contrast, the consumer, they want it to be less restrictive. Copyright law is to be lax. Right? So strengthened here means made more restrictive, not uniform, not impose harsher penalties. That's too specific. I suppose is one way to make it more restrictive, I guess. But I think what they actually mean is just to make it encompass more things. Not necessarily the things they already encompass, just make those penalties harsher, but to actually broaden the scope of it. Dutifully enforced is not that it's not being enforced, more fully recognized as legitimate. Again, by whom? 17 asks, which one of the following claims about the documents placed on web would the author be likely agree with? Well, we know a lot about what the author thinks about documents placed on the web. Specifically about whether in relation to whether it infringes copyright. The answer is doesn't. Such documents cannot receive adequate protection, but I don't think. Unless current copyright laws are strengthened. No, that's wrong. He thinks these documents. So these are documents that this document is a document that some content creator, some author put up there, right? So does our author think that they can't receive that the only way to give it protection is copyright? No, he talks about passwords. Right? B says such documents cannot be protected from unauthorized distribution without significantly diminishing the potential of the web to be a. No, that's not true. Again, passwords is one way to do it. Protect it from unauthorized distribution without significantly diminishing, right, the potential of the web to be a. So this is also not true. or I should say the author wouldn't agree. The nearly instantaneous access afforded by the web makes it impossible in practice to limit. No, again, passwords. Right? I think all three answer choices so far can be eliminated by just referencing that part about passwords. D says such documents can be protected from copyright infringement with the least damage only by altering existing legal codes. No, again, passwords. Passwords do less damage than altering existing copyright laws. E says such documents cannot fully contribute to the web's free exchange of ideas unless their authors allow them to be freely accessed to those who wish to do so. Yeah, and the author would agree with this. See, this is kind of tricky. It's a subtle answer choice because it's you're tempted to say no, the author wouldn't agree to this, right? But it has to do with this word fully. The author says, look, you have to it's a trade-off. There are ways in which you can sort of balance your competing values. One, you want to protect the rights of content creators, but two, you really want everyone to be able to access it. Sure, so these documents, they can't fully contribute to the web free exchange unless the authors allow them to be freely accessed. But then the author ultimately says, but given sort of how people's values are lined up, you don't want authors to give them free access because then, maybe authors wouldn't be incentivized to produce anything anymore. But certainly the author agrees that to fully contribute, you should do that. So the sense in which the authors are limiting the access with things like passwords, it does dampen the full contribution, but the trade-off is worth it. So that's where E is a little bit tricky. You have to infer that because the author does make this idea of like this trade-off thing. So you have to infer that he does believe that in order to fully contribute, you have to open all access. 18 says, based on the passage, relationship between strengthening current copyright laws and relying on passwords, what's the relationship? It's analogous to what relationship? Okay, so let's think about this. Before we get into the answer choice, remember, answer choices are just like, they're just landmines. You don't want to step into it unless you're ready. So one thing we can do is just strengthen current copyright laws, which would just be sort of like a blanket solution to not let anybody access it. Or just passwords, right? Like let only the people you want to access it. So is it analogous to allowing everyone use of a public facility? But that's not. No, that's not. Strengthening copyright will be like allowing no one to use of a facility and restricting its use to members of the community. That's not right. This is allowing more people and then allowing fewer people. This is allowing nobody and allowing just a subset. So this has a relationship like opposite or something. B says outlawing the use of a drug and outlawing its sale. But use and sale, that's like two different like segments of this transaction. So that's also not right. Prohibiting a sport and relying on participants to employ proper safety gear. Yeah, there you go. See, like prohibiting a sport will be like just flat out a complete ban. No one gets to ski, just like how no one gets to create these links. Versus just count on the people who participate in skiers to wear safety gear. Just count on the authors to provide for their own safety by locking up their content behind passwords. So that's great. That matches analogous the relationship. Passing a new law, enforcing a law, but no, come on, it's not passing a law and enforcing a law. E says allowing unrestricted entry to building and restricting entry to those who have been issued a badge. See, E is very, very tricky if you misread, right? If you misread this. Allowing unrestricted entry means everyone gets to enter, compared to what? Restricting entry to only those who have a badge? But that's almost just like what A says, allowing everyone. But it should be the reverse of that. It should be allowing nobody to enter and then restricting entry to only those with a badge. Then E would parallel this very well. 19 says the passage most strongly implies which from the following. This kind of question, you get a lot of questions like that. It's like a most strongly supported question in logical reasoning. You just take the information here and somewhere in the passage and then support the answer choice. A says there are no creators of links to web pages who are also owners. I don't know that of IP on the page. I don't know. Owners may create links to their own stuff. Nothing in here tells me that they're two completely distinct and exclusive groups. B says the person who controls access to a web page should be considered the distributor of the document, and that's great. That's exactly right. Because you see, that's the whole argument, in fact. Right? The question, the issue really is who controls document. So it's A that controls document. That controls distribution, rather. So then B should not be considered distributor. A is the one that's implicitly offering it for distribution. Right? You see, so A is the one that should be considered. That's the implication there. That the person who puts it up, who controls the distribution, that's just a way of referring to the people who put it up, should be considered the distributor because it's offering up for distribution. C says rights of privacy should not be extended to owners of IP placed on the web. That's not rights of privacy, right? Why not? I mean, I don't even know if we talk about rights of privacy. But anyway, those who create links to web pages have primary control over those who read the documents on those. Yeah, that's so tricky, right? This is such a tricky answer choice. those who create links to web pages, they have primary control. No, it's those who create the content, they have primary control over distribution, not the ones who create links that have primary control over the who read. That's like if I create a link to something, then I control who accesses the document. But that's not anywhere from the passage. E says a document on a web page must be converted to its physical document. What? Via printing before? No, come on. I mean, imagine this clear-cut case. I figure out a password and I just crack the password and I distribute the password. I think in that case, it's very clear that I'm circumventing all the walls that are set up in order to legally distribute the document. Question 20 says, according to the passage, which one of the following features of outgoing messages left on the phone answering machine is relevant to the debate? So remember this whole analogy, this analogous argument about the voicemail. Or where's that actually? Yeah, it's over here. They're talking about the voice message that the author leaves on the machine. So what feature of it is relevant to this debate? Well, such messages are carried out by electronic medium communication, but that makes it relevant, I suppose. I don't even think that does make it relevant for the discussion. So what if it's carried by electronic medium? Right? Okay, so is our website. Okay, but that doesn't answer whether or not it's, is that copyright infringement? Right? The author is trying to make the case that because you left it on your machine, you're offering it up for distribution. The fact that it's electronic really, that's like contextualizing our argument, but that's not the relevant thing that we need to be talking about. B says such messages are not legally protected against unauthorized distribution, but that's not true. They are protected against unauthorized distribution. We're just trying to figure out if it is. We're trying to figure out under what conditions it counts as unauthorized distribution. C says transmission of such message is virtually instantaneous. Also true, but that has what does that have to do with this question of whether the B who hands out the number, or B the distributor, is committing an act of copyright infringement by doing that. D says people do not usually care whether or not others might record such messages. What? People don't usually care whether others might record such? I have no idea what he's talking about. E says such messages have purposely been made available to anyone who calls that telephone number. See, that's true, and it's relevant. It's because these messages are purposely made to anyone available that the author is saying that it's like A is offering it up for distribution. And that's why B shouldn't be liable. Right? It's true. It's both a true statement and it's the relevant thing to focus on. Just like how the author of a web page puts a story up on the page for the purpose of having others read it. Right? That's 20 is a pretty tough question, but because a lot of the stuff is true, this is true, but it's just not relevant. Right? Whereas this is the relevant point. The fact that they've been purposely made available is what absolves B from copyright infringement violations. 21 says the author's discussion telephone answering machine serves primarily to make his argument. Right, it's an analogous case to make his argument. Right, compare and contrast legal problems created by two different sources of media. No, there's not compare and contrast. Provide an analogy, illustrate the positions taken by each of two sides. But no, it's not. This is a very one-sided argument. It's the author's side, and that's it. Show that the legal problems produced by new communication technology are not themselves new. I guess you might come to this conclusion you read the answering machine, you're like, oh, I guess they already had to deal with it, but we don't even know if that's true. We don't even know if it has been litigated, right? This whole answering machine business. So maybe it is a new problem, right? But certainly, whatever. I suppose I don't need to go there because it certainly is not serving that purpose. The author doesn't care to argue whether it's new or what, right? To illustrate the basic principle the author believes should help determine the outcome of the debate. Yeah, there you go. To illustrate that principle. To illustrate the principle of you're offering it up for other people to hear, right? So this is like just passing it out. So that principle is in turn what determines this, right? That's a whole legal argument tradition that we have in this country. You argue to precedent because precedential cases set out some legal rules and principles that you think then should apply, right? So that's what we're doing. We're illustrating that principle, which helps our case. E says to show that telephone use also raises concerns about infringement. Again, no. We just don't care. Again, you might actually, after reading this, you're like, oh, I wonder if telephone, use raise concerns about copyright infringement. That's fine. You can, discover that on your own if you want, but that's not the author's purpose. 22 says, according to the passage, present copyright laws do what? This is very, very specific. Present copyright laws. It's a tricky question because of how specific it is. You have to go back to where we have present copyright laws. Current copyright laws give owners of IP the right to sue a distributor of unauthorized copies of material, even if the distributor did not personally make copies. So I got these copies of a new book from my friend who just bootlegged it, and then I'm distributing them, like physical copies of it, distributing. Then I'm liable to be sued. So present copyright laws allow completely unrestricted use of any document placed by its author on the web. But without even knowing this, you should know that A is not right. That just so. I mean, that's the whole. If this were true, that what is the author doing trying to argue with you? If anything on the web could just be used by anybody. B says allow those who establish links to the document to control its distribution. But that's, again, without knowing this, you should be able to eliminate B, because we established that it's not the ones who make the links that control. It's the content creators that control the distribution. Prohibit anyone but the author of the document from making a profit from the document's distribution. That is just, I don't think, again, you should be able to eliminate C without referencing this, because we don't really talk about profit very much, or profit is over here. We don't talk about profit very much. D says allow the author of a document to sue anyone who distributes the document without permission, and there you go. Right? That's this. And E says should be altered to allow more complete freedom. No, the author is saying don't strengthen current copyright laws. Don't make it more restrictive. But he also doesn't argue that you should alter it to make it weaker, to make it more or to make it less restrictive.